Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and I'm excited to talk some MLS with you all today. We do not have Joe Lowry with us. He did two MLS-centric shows last week, which triggers the seldom-seen rule of you also get a one-game suspension if you do too much MLS coverage. So Joe is not with us, but Jeff Reuter is. Jeff, it is lovely to have you back from Austin. How was your time in Texas?
It was good. It's also nice to skirt the rules. I'm also operating off of a well-worn MLS rule that is certain people can do it and still not get suspended. No, Texas was good. The barbecue was great. The weather was unpleasant, but the people was awesome. It was awesome. Like, it's one of those things where it's like there just aren't enough of those events anymore in like American soccer. Whereas there's too many events. Let me be clear. But there aren't as many, and this is maybe just like there isn't like the uniform culture anymore, where it's like, this is where you go. This is the time where you get to see your friends. And so it was nice to see my friends.
It wasn't the skills competition? You didn't all come together to watch that illustrious competition?
It's kind of nice, though, because like the skills competition is tailor-made for just kind of like happy hour vibes, except for there's like boxes of pizza in the press box instead of like a full cater meal, and there's no alcohol. So it's a little different than your usual happy hour, but it's still a happy hour all the same, although I will say I don't think Austin is terribly well known for its pizza, and I certainly won't leave Austin having been better known. Or better fond of its pizza.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Graham and I were discussing how the skills competition, like in broadcast format, is a bit more enjoyable. Is it still the case that in person it's a bit of a lag in between events, or did they find ways to cover it well?
No, they did. I mean, like there were a couple of those things where you truly do have that. Like, we put a ball under a cup, and now all the three cups are moving. Ooh, what are you gonna do? So, like, we're playing the 1950s ballpark hits, but no, for the most part, I guess if you're a big iShow Speeds fan, they might have had some really good bumper to bumper stuff. I had not heard of the lad until about 2 weeks ago. So.
And the All-Star Game itself, I hadn't heard of him either, aside from his like cameo appearance on CBS's Champions League coverage, I think, when Graham and Ryan were discussing him at length, and I nodded along blankly, because I don't know who he is either. But I did watch the All-Star.
He also did a live stream with Johnny Infantino, if I remember right, before the Club World Cup. I think he was one of many shows. Yeah, so that says a lot.
The game itself, how was it? Any takeaways from that one, aside from it's a fun exhibition game?
It's a fun exhibition game.
There we go.
Yeah. That's really all there is.
Then let's move swiftly away from one made-up and potentially unnecessary competition to the League's Cup. Maybe
the competition of repute, yeah.
Exactly. We've got it kicking off this week. We're going to talk about our general thoughts on the competition, but we do have some formatting changes. Jeff, shall we dive in?
Yes, it is fewer teams, which is probably for the best. And the idea is basically the thing.
Still a lot of teams, but fewer
too many teams.
Yeah.
But now it's like a symptom of this is how big Major League Soccer has gotten and how big arguably Liga MX is. Where what you have now is 18 teams in Liga MX. Okay, so we're just going to do 18 teams from Major League Soccer. And before it was every single team goes into the arena, right? So it was like 48 or 47 teams in the past, and then this year would have been 48 with San Diego. But I think that they realized that the intrigue was not having these weird, like, kind of mid-season group stage games between two MLS teams. So now the promise is that every game in the first league phase will be an MLS versus Liga MX game. It is the 18 teams that qualified for the playoffs last year, except for the Vancouver Whitecaps, due to their lengthy run into the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They were swapped out for San Diego FC, which is a club you would imagine you would want in a competition between Major League Soccer and Liga MX, one of the teams along the border. That makes a lot of sense. So now we are into like that Champions League format sort of era of the League's Cup. So the League's Cup league phase, I guess, is what you would call it. So first there's a league and then there's a cup. I guess they've named this pretty much as well as you can to educate people on what you've got. You've got the league and then you've got the cup.
And it took me too long while we're getting into the semantics of it all to recognize that it's not League 'S Cup, it is League's Cup plural, because there's two leagues involved, which does make sense. The format, I think, also makes sense, but does require a little bit of explanation, because as you've outlined, you've got 18 from one league, 18 from the other, but then rather than just a straight group sort of situation, it is a group of sorts, but you have it broken down by sort of coefficient ranking and the like, so that you get relatively evenly spaced groups of six or sets of six or whatever the terminology would be, and that allows you to have an MLS team playing 3 Liga MX opponents. You have each Liga MX opponent playing 3 MLS opponents. So to your point, you get everybody playing teams from the other country. So it creates that level of interest because too often we've had a lot of MLS teams playing each other for like the 4th or 5th time that season. Now we basically can't get that until the semifinals of the tournament?
Yeah, because exactly. Because I think that they've really jerry-rigged this thing now where the quarterfinal will be determined on the league phase. So you will have 4 MLS teams, the 4 best performing MLS teams, and the 4 best performing Liga MX team. Which makes some sense, right? Like for all of the reasons where again, you just don't want those dead rubber games in the knockout and in the league phase, which they're calling phase 1 to try to get away from having people say Leagues Cup league phase. But I'm honestly going to have a harder time if I have to call it phase 1. So I'm calling it the league's phase. Those matches...
Phase the first? Is that better?
Yeah. Phase the first is quite nice, actually. Yeah, no, that's proper. See, that's the sort of way that you talk about a respected competition. Phase the first. And,
that's what it will be called in 2026. Don't worry about it.
1/4 of the finalists, right? Like these sorts of things, I think, go a long way to help grow the game of soccer in the United States. Matches go right to penalties. That's like probably the one thing that a lot of people think that the Leagues Cup has gotten right from jump. Just like if we're going to do these games, let's not do the 120 minutes. Let's just do the 90, right? So that's probably helpful. Yeah. And then, you've got your winners of the quarterfinal. To your point, there is a chance where you have like an Open Cup scenario where it's like, doesn't matter if it's MLS versus USL. It doesn't mean that the USL teams are going to get past. You could have MLS versus Liga MX teams. Doesn't mean that you're still going to have 2-2 because each quarterfinal is going to be MLS versus Liga MX. Again, they are really recalibrating this thing to make sure you get as many of those like league versus league matchups, which... on the what, like we can get it. Maybe now we're getting into the heart of the thing instead of like the mechanics of the beast. But like it's interesting just to see how they're recognizing already like some of the initial design flaws, and credit to them reacting to it instead of just saying, you know what, we don't want to change this thing until after the World Cup when we'll have more time or whatever. I think that a lot of these are, compared to what was before, I think are really understandable modifications, right?
Yeah, I honestly think they've made it as exciting of a competition as it could be because you are now getting the true sort of, I don't want to say exhibition feel to it because that's not the best word, but you are getting, It's like when they first introduced interleague play in baseball. And so now you're finally playing opposition that you never really get to play outside of the playoffs or a cup competition, I guess would be the case for soccer. And so there is I have an excitement for it, and I think an excitement for those 18 teams from MLS going against Liga MX opposition, who you would assume in a lot of cases will be stronger and have spent a little bit more money. So I think they've made a lot of smart changes to make it as interesting to a neutral and I think to diehard supporters as they could. The question still becomes, do we need this? Is this a good idea? And I think that's a conversation worth having, even if it's been had before, because... on the one hand, it's an interesting competition. It plays on the USA-Mexico rivalry, obviously. It's a conversation we often have about the relative strength of MLS compared to Liga MX, oftentimes from the CONCACAF Champions Cup landscape, which can be a little bit, I guess, sort of stacked against MLS for reasons of their own making. Yes. And so I think it makes a ton of sense to do this in theory. It's just that when you're doing it after the All-Star break with like most of your season played, it feels very much like a blatant, we need to generate some interest ahead of the playoffs. We know everybody's kind of maybe waiting for playoffs to come around for that final stretch run. It feels like we're kind of already in the stretch run as they're doing this. Yeah. And so I think they've done everything they could to make the tournament appealing and potentially successful. At the same time, I still find myself being like, why are we doing this in the middle of the season? I don't quite get it.
Yeah, it feels like one of those things that would be, if we're going to do the calendar change, which was the other big talking point of All-Star, right? If you do that, maybe it makes sense as kind of your restart in January, and it's kind of like a bubble tournament, so you can play it warm climate. Some games in Mexico, actually, wouldn't that be fun? And then, your Texases, your Floridas, your Arizonas, your Nevadas, whatever. Just like keep it in that sort of geographical area, and then that also maybe gets away from some of the strain of the cold weather climates, albeit they are all on the road, and ask Montreal and Portland how much fun that is to spend like half a season on the road while you're waiting for your stadium. The other thing I think in terms of, I fully agree with you. The format is better. The format is about as entertaining as it could get. Like, as you read it, it's just like, oh yeah, okay, that's right. It will always be, these league versus league sort of competitions putting in conversation. I like that. It still feels like they're trying to recapture the lightning in the bottle of 2023. And I think that there were a few factors that made that 23 installment so unmissable in the landscape that it just was not in 24, and I doubt it will reach in 25 through no fault of its own. You had a confluence of factors. Number one, it was Lionel Messi's first games, since leaving Europe. And so there was just going to be global interest in how does Lionel Messi hang with clubs from MLS and Liga MX, and every performance of his was appointment viewing and stuff. So that was going to happen whether it was the MLS regular season, whether it was the US Open Cup, or whether it was Leagues Cup. It just happened to be Leagues Cup in the table, having that monopolization of that first month of Messi, Busquets, and Jordi Alba in Miami. Okay, so that's you can't recreate that. I think that every team in MLS recognizes there will only be one moment like that, probably for another generation, and that was it. Okay. The other thing is the men's calendar was less congested at the time. If you were following, I will painfully remember Messi's debut kicked off at the exact same time that the U.S. women were playing their first game in the group stage of the 23 World Cup. So it's truly the one time I've ever had to keep one eye on one game, one eye on the other, and still right off of each of them close to the whistle. It was Clockwork Orange stuff. It should not be done. It should not be tested. But you look at the, just right now, I think people are burnt out on it. I think that there's sort of that big event fatigue where how can you get that enthusiasm for Leagues Cup and Club World Cup and your teams, if they're in the Open Cup or if they're making a good run in MLS or the USL, and the European season is about to start, and last year was a Copa America, and next year's World Cup, where there's just this sort of you can't tell me that every tournament is appointment viewing, because at a certain point I have too many appointments and I'm not going to make any of them. So it still feels like they're kind of forcing fetch to happen, and I don't know if it's going to happen. I would tend to say it'll just be a smaller version that's sort of a merger of its Campeones Cup, which is also a game that it has every year, putting a champion of Mexico against a champion of MLS, which why? It happens in a weird time of the calendar too. I don't know. It just, there's a lot of this that is still very forcing something to happen, and I'm just not sure that the audience has actually been asking for it to this extent and at this cadence of an annual midsummer tournament.
I think it's a really good point. And I think if we hadn't just had the Club World Cup, maybe that makes things a little bit better, because reading some of the previews and they focus in on this team just played in the Club World Cup and looked okay. So will they kind of springboard that into a good Leagues Cup run? And some of the novelty of different teams from different countries playing each other is not really there when you've just had a gigantic competition that did that exact same thing, only bigger and with more money. Albeit with fewer MLS teams in it, and certainly in the knockout round. But it still, I think, takes some of that novelty away, and now just feels like another competition that is kind of an exhibition, but kind of matters because you've got CONCACAF Champions Cup places on the line, but also kind of doesn't. And it begs the question of how seriously are MLS teams going to take it. I'm not sure there's really any solution to this, because it seems like a thing the league wants to do. They want to make sure there is still interest. Maybe that means getting rid of playoffs and just doing a flat table. That's never going to happen. Maybe you make the season shorter and make the playoffs longer. Probably also not going to happen. So I don't think there's a perfect solution, but I think you are totally right that the number of games, the number of tournaments, the number of competitions that we are expected to care about and understand at the same time, I think does hurt this quite a bit.
And there is some crossover fatigue here as well, I would say, because you have the Campeones Cup. You also have the MLS All-Star Game, right, which is now MLS versus Liga MX. So you have kind of three different things from July to September. And this is something that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is learning right now, which is if you don't have standalones that can get people interested and everything is a crossover event, eventually you just don't even have things to cross over or things to check in on, storylines to evolve, right? And so there's a certain point where it's we know that MLS wants to have greater mental presence within the brains of Liga MX fans. We know that Liga MX wants to have its teams be more relevant in the U.S. outside of like the core audience, who might be Mexican Americans or might be immigrants or whatever the case may be, grew up with it, let's say, a new audience, that sort of like 21st century streaming audience, to get more into Liga MX is basically what they're going for, right? And I understand that, but there's a certain point where you're just, again, you're forcing it to happen too often in too many different formats, trying to see what sticks. And at a certain point, like, people just might not say it sticks, right? Yep. And that's like, can be a design flaw at a certain point. So
how seriously do you expect MLS teams to take this competition? Because some certainly will be prioritizing making a run. I'm assuming Inter Miami are targeting another successful campaign. By contrast, I think Brian Schmetzer of Seattle was talking about how he kind of actively plans to rotate and try different things. And it doesn't seem like Seattle are going to be gunning for silverware in this one.
No, and you can understand why if they're coming off the Club World Cup, right? But
where they were totally happy to play and there was no protest at all. Don't ask questions.
None whatsoever. They had a great time, and they left it with a T-shirt too. It's great. No, it's I think that there will be varying levels of buy-in. I think that even if you do have all 18 of last year's playoff teams, and then of course the San Diego, Vancouver, we're just swapping out one at the top of the West sort of thing. There are still some teams that you look at and hear, it's like, okay, I don't think they'll be competitive. Like Montreal, LA Galaxy were playoff teams last year, bless their hearts. I think it's going to be a tough one for them, right? Real Salt Lake is outside the playoff places right now. The New York teams are kind of up and down. So, like, there are some teams in here that Houston maybe wouldn't be... to go back to the Club World Cup argument, where it's like, okay, why aren't Liverpool and Barcelona here? Wouldn't that be the way to make this the best competition? It's like, I don't think you really have that issue, but at the same point, I think you do have some teams that maybe will have mixed motivations and maybe mixed capabilities, let's say, to compete on multiple fronts at once. I know that there are some teams like Seattle, Minnesota probably, who's also going to be hosting the semifinal of the U.S. Open Cup, maybe won't look at the Leagues Cup as important, because there is a trophy that's more important to them on offer, instead of like, let's just go win 7 games in one summer against the same 2 leagues. Like, I think they like the Open Cup. It's a little bit more their speed, and they have some unfinished business for a couple of the veterans after losing the 2019 final in Atlanta. So there's a few teams. We'll see. I'm sure that there will be a few as well. LAFC wants to win as much hardware as they can before Sharundalo leaves. Atlanta United would like to show that they can play some competent soccer, and I think in their own right, that's a trophy if they like get a result. But yeah, your mileage may vary.
What are the teams that aren't participating going to be doing for the next month?
Good question. I'm trying to remember now if there is actually going to be like a little MLS action on the side, because I don't know why they would want to cannibalize their own product. It doesn't look like they show up on the schedule whatsoever. So you've got some club friendlies, like Nashville is hosting Aston Villa, DC United's hosting Ethiopia. That's a fascinating little back-to-back. Yeah. So yeah,
money making time, baby.
Exactly. There's there's money to be. There's always money in the Ethiopia friendly. That's what they always say.
That's what they always say. That's what George Bluth would always scream.
That's right.
Because I look at it and like, I guess you could structure it, Major League Soccer, such that the schedules allow like the teams that aren't participating to catch up on some games, but then you do kind of cannibalize your own product. To your point, instead, I think one of the teams that's played the fewest number of games at this point is Inter Miami, who will be playing in this competition and then have a good number of games still to play thereafter. I feel like we're going to see some tired legs from Inter Miami before too long, if not already, I guess.
Yeah, and that's probably why you bring in Rodrigo de Paul, right? Like, and why you need to prioritize that now and not later is because, wow, you just need guys who are motivated and fresh and can bring new energy to the party that's now in its like 17th hour. And yeah.
Even if we are sort of bemused by the tournament, we will be talking about it here on the show. We haven't done much in terms of a preview, but I'm going to assume that the favorites would be from the Liga MX side, plus maybe Inter Miami. Is that a fair estimation, Jeff?
That's fair. I think Inter Miami will probably be the team that takes it most seriously. And yeah, you have a couple of others, your LAFCs, your Columbuses, who are always making a very good effort in these sorts of things. But there's also like hosting privilege, where Club America is going to get its home away from home in Houston all the way through, I think, the semifinal if they make it that far. So yes. I would tend to think that there are a couple of teams from Liga MX that will have not the deck stacked more in their favor necessarily, but I think that they'll have a clearer way to control their destiny on the way to the final than they've ever had before as well, with some of them having that control over a venue.
Well, be excited. I look forward to phase the first, the phased inning, phase one. It should be very good. But for now, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about some transfers that have happened, that might happen. We'll see what Cincinnati allows to happen. Back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show, a transfer that we have not talked about a ton because it didn't feel like it was actually going to happen, but now feels like it might, Jeff, is Thomas Muller to Major League Soccer. I think he announced that he was going to be playing overseas a while back. Yes. A lot of expectation that it would be in the United States. It's in the U.S. League, but it likely will not be in the U.S. where he calls home because Thomas Muller to Vancouver seems to be creeping ever closer across the line.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because this is like the rare discovery rights. The whole concept of discovery rights is the idea that two MLS teams won't outbid each other for the same player. So it's like you guys have to figure it out before we enter the market, and before we go to the market, we know which one of you is getting which player. Yeah. Right?
I love that in the explanation of why discovery rights still exist. It's like if you're going with like the 3 bullet points, bullet point 2 is basically to like limit bidding wars, and then number 3 is to incentivize competition. And I'm not sure you can have those two things in. At the very least, one of those needs to be 1, and one of them needs to be 3 with something in between, because otherwise, it looks a little confusing.
It does, doesn't it? It's like you're trying to really sell someone on the bad idea right after you've said the bad idea. But but don't worry, you'll still have you'll still have that autonomy over the backyard. It just doesn't matter that there's no grass there. Right. So feels a bit like that. And Thomas Muller at first, the obvious fit was LAFC because LAFC needs a striker. They got rid of Olivier Giroud, who has not yet been announced as a loanee at the LA Galaxy. We'll get there. And they have some star needs, and this is the club that they are. So the assumption was, okay, it's going to be LAFC, and then suddenly it's like, German heritage over in Cincinnati. I think it makes more sense tactically. Play him off of Evander, and Kevin Denke can kind of do the more natural 9 and 10 roles, and Muller's always worked better kind of in that Raumtorhüter role, which doesn't really have like a direct here's your spot on the field. So if you have that more crystallized positioning plus Reingold, Reingold would be the Vancouver scenario we're getting to later. There's too much. This is like unheard of to actually have 3 teams, competitive teams at that, with clear identities all going for the same guy. This is the sort of stuff that I wish MLS was doing more, because you could argue that better fit at LAFC will probably not because of Bouanga and same issues that Giroud didn't work over there. Okay, that's great. So maybe Cincinnati makes some sense. Yeah, I could see it. But Vancouver is probably the best spot tactically, because I think that Vancouver has the clearest need. They have the clearest goals left on the table, we'll say. Yes, there is some... there's finishing chops, when you look at Reingold coming back, but also Sebastian Berhalter's late runs on the edge of the box, Brian White, all these sorts of things where you do have goal scorers. But I think that with their level of ambition, which is this year to challenge for MLS Cup, and with the squad that they have, which is downright knackered after the first half of the season, maybe it makes sense to bring a World Cup winning veteran with Champions League titles and Bundesliga titles and more goals, and just like it's Thomas Muller, man. I don't know, it explains itself to a degree, right? So he's a player who's always relied more on kind of his guile and his technical ability than his physical acumen, which is a good thing for this stage of his career. And now, pending an agreement over his discovery rights, which are currently held by FC Cincinnati, who seem to be a little sad about this whole thing ending with Vancouver. That doesn't seem to be the team that they expected to find themselves outflanked by in these talks, to cite LAFC as well. They're trying to barter over that price, because they're like, no, we actually, the way that you keep someone on your discovery list is to say we have the viable means to make a credible offer, and they still have that, and they still have the cap space. They've been tailoring their squad build to possibly bring in Thomas Muller specifically. So we'll see. This is kind of the scenario that MLS thought that it had listed enough bullet points to avoid, and yet we are going to need bullet points 4, 5, and 6 by the sound of it.
And to dive deeper into the Cincinnati aspect of this for a moment, because I think much has been made of them holding on to the discovery rights and the frustration around that. The German reporting has been very heavily focused on what are these things and why do they exist? And I think even some MLS fans continue to be flummoxed by it. But to my understanding, FC Cincinnati initially began conversations with him in the winter, I think, or maybe even last season. They're talking to Thomas Muller about making a move happen, and at that point he reportedly wants designated player status. He wants that extra amount of money, and it just doesn't quite work for Cincinnati in the moment. Now that he is likely moving to Vancouver on a TAM deal, at least that's been the reporting. Cincinnati definitely able to find a way to make that happen. And so, to your point, there is the means, there is the desire to have him play for Cincinnati. They have his discovery rights. The issue would just be that the player doesn't really want to be there, is how it seems at this point. And so you can kind of understand why Cincinnati are frustrated by this, but I think it's that extra mechanism of the discovery rights that moves that frustration into a little bit of an absurd territory, because now, lots of clubs are frustrated when they miss out on a player. Just ask Newcastle with a number of their targets this season. But it would be fascinating for Newcastle to be like, no, you can't sign Ugo Ekitike because we had his discovery rights first, so now you have to give us money. Otherwise, we're holding on to him. And we've talked about it in the past, about why that exists and how it kind of serves to protect the league in some ways and protect smaller teams and allow smaller teams to compete, or perceived smaller teams to compete. But to your point, when it's Vancouver outflanking Cincinnati, I think it gets a little bit murkier pretty quickly.
Especially because, the scenarios that you're listing with Newcastle, that's such a clear, unfortunately, we do often talk about the transfer market like a meat market, right? To go back to, I don't know why, meat raffles, meat markets were just...
You're just going to keep making it happen, Jeff, I see.
Midwest. I'm going to lure you guys here by the end of this show. I guarantee it. No, I think that usually we talk about it as if they don't have this, get that, right? And it really it's stripping the humanity out of the thing. But I think that's how contracts, as long as you think about it as contracts and not humans, I think it's a little bit easier. So if you don't get your top target, okay, you move on to the next target. Right? That's just how this thing usually works is, okay, we didn't get Ekitike, so we have to look at other players of his position who are going to fit in a similar whatever. You have to do your calibrations and you have to weigh this all out. You have recruitment staffs, whole teams of people for these sorts of things now at the highest levels. In MLS, though, you do need to really tailor your preparations to be able to make an acquisition of a TAM or DP caliber possible. And so I can see where Cincinnati would be upset about that. I can also see where Cincinnati, in this case, this is that case where they're probably really mad at the agent above all else, or whoever is brokering this deal on Muller's behalf, to have suddenly changed the landscape and say, okay, it doesn't have to be a DP rule anymore. Oh, okay, well, hold on a minute. Well, that's not good faith. Now we want to have talks on this level, right? And so if that's the case, that's where the discovery rights rule actually does a disservice, because now there is a process where Cincinnati can come in and actually make a stink about it and hold this thing up and keep Vancouver from getting a player that they want, right? It's actually creating an even worse situation, I would argue, than the one they're trying to avoid, which is simply two ambitious teams both want Thomas Muller. I don't really know why that's a bad thing per se when you say it like that, right? But let chips fall where they may, and let's see which team presents the best package to the guy and gets him over there, right? So yeah, it's weird. It's like you've added a filibuster clause almost, but without this is why we should do it.
But it seems like the other aspect here is that, according to the reporting at least, Thomas Muller wants to play in Vancouver. And I think that is what tends to really frustrate people or confuse people at the very least. And Jermaine Jones put out a post about this, I think today or yesterday, basically because when he comes to Major League Soccer, wants to play in Chicago, has a deal in place to play in Chicago, but there is, according to him, a backroom deal, although that seems like it was the case, that New England would get the next big USMNT player. And so there ends up being a quote-unquote blind draw that is not blind at all and is definitely going to New England, and that's exactly what happens. And there is this kind of feeling that the player's desire and where they want to be is second to the deals that are made to kind of allow MLS to continue to operate and allow it to continue to operate in its present format with a lot of the present restrictions in place.
Yeah, and I think that MLS would like to say it's in a different spot than it was 11 years ago when that all happened. But I think that, the parallels, unfortunately, are pretty clear, right? There's a player who wants to go to one place, and will they get their wish here? I think that this one's more likely to pan out. I think it's even more visible. I think that the league has more stability. And frankly, I think that they want Vancouver. Keep in mind, Vancouver is actively, they're attempting to sell the club. Greg Kerfoot is. And so, they're also trying to find a place in Vancouver to build a stadium. And okay, so are you going to have more Vancouverans excited about the concept of a stadium and the Whitecaps and whatever if you have a World Cup winning player? Honestly, probably, right? I think that these sorts of things can go a long way. If you actually have Thomas Muller scoring goals and getting fans excited again, and maybe he goes and does events, maybe he doesn't, whatever. I think that can go a long way. So there is an off-field component here as well, which is literally finding the next field. And Yeah, I think it's if he wants to go to Vancouver, and if that's part of the sales pitch too, is like, you have a legacy play here too. Like, don't take that chance away from the guy.
It has been a great transfer from that level of speculation standpoint. From does this help them stay there? Does it help them get a new deal? What's the legacy long term? But then also, like I've read stuff about how Thomas Muller, much has been made that his like real priority is the horse farm that he and his wife operate, and that he's very big into horses, and his footballing career is almost secondary. So in Vancouver, there's more space where he could theoretically pursue something similar, or there's more outdoor activities than there might be elsewhere. But then there's also been speculation that he doesn't want to reside in the United States at present, given the political climate, that he wants to live in Canada instead. I think there's probably some truth there, but it's led to just a lot of speculation, a lot of like psychological analysis of Thomas Muller that I have found fascinating. It has also led to even more exploration of the intricacies of Major League Soccer. Jeff, I'm going to ask you a question now that I don't know if you will have an answer to. It's the most MLS question I think I've ever asked. Here we go.
This is good.
If a team wants to sign a designated player on a TAM deal, but a second team has his discovery rights, does the fee paid for the discovery rights factor into his TAM status?
That's excellent. I don't think it does. I think it should. I think it should.
So there's no risk that like discovery rights amount would push them above a threshold where he would then be a designated player, thus not able to play for Montreal.
I am actually going to ask the league about this. I will ask the league about this after we record this, and I will be very fascinated to hear, because I think it should, especially to your point, though, like this could be a pretty lucrative one, right? Where like if they think they're going to give him on TAM and your cutoff is vaguely $1.7 million of salary, so they're going to sign him to a 1.5 or a 1.7, right? Like give him the max that we can under the budget, whatever. That would push it, right? And that would be enough. But I think that they look at it as a league-specific mechanism used to obtain the rights. And so they would say it's not real money. But then I think a lot of people could say, you treat it like real money within your salary budget calculations, right? So, like, shouldn't it be a form of a transfer fee, basically? And at that point, I think that you're looking at other situations like Christian Kappas, getting Dallas getting his rights and all these sorts of things, and supplemental roster and all that stuff. But I think that there's a credible argument that could be made that they should count.
And that's where I've seen it even reported that he would be on like a salary of $700,000, I think, for the rest of the season, which feels very low, even
Canadian?
With not. Oh, that could be, yeah.
Like that's interesting, know. Like because that would be even lesser if it's like 700,000 euros. That's like a decent amount of Canadian dollars. So like I'd be curious about that too.
There we go. But it does seem like a wild amount, even like a wildly small amount, even for the like few games we have left, and with left in the season, and with Vancouver not participating in Leagues Cup as well. It's basically 10 games plus however far they go in the playoffs. At the same time, it's Thomas Muller, who is quite an established name, quite an established figure. And my assumption is that let's say he's on $1 million this season. I'm guessing that jumps to like 4 or 5 next year if he sticks around.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe even a little bit more too, right? Just like I'm sure that he was on 8 figures with Bayern. So there will be escalators. I'm sure he's talking to his old teammate Alphonso Davies about all this too, and I'm sure that that's not helping the sort of like, do you want to go to Vancouver or not? Because they are legitimately close. Like it was Muller who gave him the Roadrunner nickname, like Davies the Roadrunner nickname, like right after he arrived too, and would just say meep meep on Champions League broadcast. Which just why else tune into that except for to hear references to the Looney Tunes? It's really all you need. Crossover. That's the crossover we need. No more of this like Nickelodeon NFL sort of stuff. Let's get Looney Tunes soccer. There's like a whole line of 90s t-shirts that already makes this a reality, isn't there?
I think there are.
Probably.
One move that wasn't contentious at all and totally makes sense is Rodrigo de Paul to Inter Miami. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. That move now official. I enjoyed the picture of him chatting with suspended Messi and suspended Jordi Alba during their most recent game. But de Paul to Inter Miami, that does make them stronger right away, yes?
It does. It really does. And it's kind of amazing. Like, I think that you will, again, see clubs try to do the exact same thing. I mean, you're seeing it with Vancouver now, right? Like, the first half, it's just a half year. Why would I pay them a DP salary if it's for 10 games? Silly. So, I don't know if they're trying to get some sort of, like, annualization clause into all of this, too. But I think, for better or worse, you are seeing more clubs try to just Like, find the loophole and be less apologetic about exploiting the loophole, because I think that they found that as long as you're upfront about it, and it isn't like legitimately we're saying it's this, but really it's 5 designated players who are all earning $3 million or more. As long as you're not doing that, you can get away with it. And you can do it. You just have to be able to show your homework to the league office, apparently, and maybe not publicly. And
I feel like that homework doesn't always have to show the full work. I feel like if maybe some things don't add up, but you end up with the number that you need to end up with, they overlook. Like, you get maybe just a check instead of a check plus on that one, but that still allows you to register the player, which is what matters in the end.
I think so, exactly. It's just like it's a cursory glance. It's not a close examination, and I still like maintain what I said a couple of weeks ago. Like, there's no credible way that Miami can argue that they're using the loan stint to decide whether or not Rodrigo de Paul is a fit. Like, I just it's so beyond the Paul at a certain point where, as long as you can find a willing partner and you can tell Atletico Madrid, like, hey, if you ever do a stateside tour, yes, you can play here and we'll play you at Hard Rock and you'll collect X portion of gate or whatever, like, to make it worth their while, like, maybe, right? But it's just silly. It's just very silly. And I think that the biggest disservice is that we want to be able to talk about it as a soccer move and say, yes, this makes their midfield better. Yes, this makes it more difficult for Cincinnati and Columbus, 2 teams that are kind of built around the peripherals of their system more than the engine room themselves, to contend, because now they're going to have to recalibrate the middle of their squad, that sort of thing, in a short hurry. Like, that would be a more interesting conversation. But instead, I'm here like trying to think, like, how did they do this? And should they have done this? And a lot of teams are saying they shouldn't have done that. So I have to ask again, how are they doing this? And it's just like, it's such a silly like distraction from the competition itself.
So we'll see how things work out for Inter Miami, but we assume they will work out well. Do we assume that Son Heung-min ends up in Major League Soccer before the season is over?
It sounds like it. It sounds like it's a pretty determined, if not Tottenham. And Tottenham at this point seems like, look, we've won the trophy. He was captain for the Europa League title. He looked a lot slower from like January onward and probably November onward, honestly. Just really did struggle to keep pace with, granted, a pretty clumsily orchestrated Ange Postecoglou system, and maybe for Thomas Frank now it's more of, okay, let's get the next generation in there, and we have Matisse Tell who stuck around, so I think that there's some incomings that necessitate the outgoing of a club legend, and I think that for LAFC in particular, again, I don't really know if it makes sense for all of the reasons that Giroud didn't make sense, because he is not the same Son Heung-min who is like running weaves with Dele Alli and Harry Kane and Christian Eriksen in their primes, right? Like, this is a slightly slower and he's still set up quite a shot, but like, it's going to be much more of that first touch finishing rather than he is dribbling through to set up his own shot that he used to do. And I don't know if he's going to be able to keep stride with Denny Bouanga on the break. And so we're going right back to the same issue with a more finesseful player, admittedly, which arguably means that he won't do the hold-up work that was making Giroud at least help LAFC in build-up, if not actually doing his own work in the final third or in the box. So what is worth stressing, though, is that one of the most attended regular season games in LAFC history was their Hello Kitty night. And there is like a very big, like, sort of like South Korean community in LA. And so like, I think that there is like, we might be sleeping on the potential for like off-field attractiveness to their clubs. We so often with LA, it's like, okay, well, Carlos Vela and Chicharito and Ricky Puig is Spanish and these sorts of things, or let's just get the biggest star possible as Zlatan, whatever the case may be. Like, I think this is one where it actually could really energize a portion of the potential fan base in Los Angeles that maybe has been underserved in the past. And it would be very interesting to see whether it's Tottenham at home. There's always, like a couple of South Korean flags that are flying just over the stands and the cameras will catch. Or if he's traveling, those are often, like, I remember when he was up in Minneapolis for a preseason game in, I think, 2018 against AC Milan, there were a lot of fans who had made the trip from either South Korea or from across the country of South Korean descent who came to see Son Heung-min. So I think that there is like a lot of enthusiasm that could be around him, which is also just fun. You want to see that an MLS team signing a player can energize fans, right? Because I think we take it for granted. Like, so often it doesn't happen where you have that like Didier Drogba in Montreal moment or Clint Dempsey in Seattle moment where everyone's at the airport with posters and signs and these sorts of things, right? I think we could actually have one of those if he does sign with LAFC.
If you were If you had to say yes or no, does he play Leagues Cup, Son Heung-min?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
So you think he's like to close out the season and then make a playoff run? That's what they're targeting there?
I think so.
All right.
I think so.
All right. Well, I look forward to him. His arrival. The West Coast getting stronger. You got Thomas Muller. You got Son Heung-min. And then you've got Inter Miami. They don't quite count on the West Coast. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about some of the action from this past weekend. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. We hope you never left. Let's talk about some of the games from this past weekend. Jeff, let's start with NYCFC 4, FC Dallas 3. A lot of interesting stuff going on in this one. Let's go with maybe the more positive side of things, which would mean let's talk NYCFC and their new signing.
Yeah. Instant fit. I mean, like, you bring in... we talked a little bit about how Nico Fernandez wasn't necessarily like an obvious number 10, right? Like, he wasn't that sort of guy who's going to be playing in number 10 places and doing number 10 things all the time. He like drifts off more to the right. And he came in from the bench, had I think 61st minute, just like a half-hour cameo sort of thing, and played some really, really good through balls up the channel. And this is the sort of thing where, like, when we think of number 10, again, it's usually the position on the field. It's usually, okay, Maxi Morales wears the 10 shirt. He plays behind the striker and he plays between the wingers, right, in front of the double pivot, right? But also number 10 is like a state of mind. It's a flow state. It's something that you don't really attain, like hope to reach. It finds you and you embody it, and you are blessed to be a vessel who does number 10 things for as long as you have the footwork and the eye to do it. And I think that there have been some very good passers in Major League Soccer. Carlos Gil is a good example of this. Emmanuel Reynoso in Minnesota was another very good example of this. And it looks like Fernandez is maybe going to be one of those guys where he's just like a very good passer. He can make his pass from all over the field, so you'll see him pop up in spots, but that doesn't mean the danger is not on if he is in the defensive half, just at the edge of it, and then, kind of in the channel. He plays a really good through ball to Alonso Martinez, who is able to complete a hat trick with it, which is also just a good thing to see. The Costa Rican striker, who did fare very well in the Gold Cup, scored against the United States, of course, coming back in some sort of form. And then, credit to Matt Freese, too, on the other end. Like, had a couple of crucial saves, and you'd say, yeah, conceded 3 goals before halftime. That's not great, but locked down after halftime and didn't let in another one to bring his team back into it. They scored, obviously, the equalizer in the 46th minute, so that generally helps if you aren't really defending or you're clawing back already and you're on level footing, from the opening whistle again of the second half. But really, really good performance on the whole from New York City. Again, slowly getting Martinez acclimated into the system here, or Fernandez, and I think that relationship between Fernandez and Martinez is already on, and so it's just a matter of how they're able to elevate that, and is it going to be enough for them to make another run at least to the second round of the playoffs like they did last year under Nick Cushing.
Were you surprised at all by the strength of the New York midfield, given the absence of Keaton Parks, out with injury, but back, I think, this month?
Yeah, I was, because I think that usually...
month, I should say.
Yeah, and that will be a very welcome return as well in its own right, like as good as an acquisition. And you only got 45 minutes of Johnny Shore, but I was still really impressed with what I saw from him. Scored a goal, and 30-34 passing generally in the injury room will play pretty well. You had 2 assists coming in from Aidan O'Neill, who's a 27-year-old Australian who was starting for Keaton Park. So I think their depth maybe has been more validated. If I remember right, he came in from their friends over in, is it Melbourne City? Just from the City Football Group. He came in from within the City Football Group, so there's also like that institutional knowledge of how to play, tactically and ideologically, whatever. And then Martinez took 5 shots, and I think that generally, if you are able to get your striker a bounty of shots, Petar Musa also took 5 shots, right? Like, that's a good way to get goals, because at least it means that the ball is flowing towards where the funnel is supposed to go. So I was impressed overall, though. Like, with the midfield, I think that you saw some panic station sort of stuff because you didn't have Keaton Parks, and I think that just goes to validate the sort of calming presence and the I can do a bit of everything that he has in his game, which I've always really appreciated. Thankfully for New York City's upside, they were also able to win a surprisingly difficult away day without him. So that's good too.
Yeah, surprisingly difficult. FC Dallas getting the 3 first-half goals. 45 plus 8 is a good first-half time to score. But it's still a loss for FC Dallas.
Yes.
Jeff, make it make sense. What's happening here? Why suddenly is Lucho Acosta, maybe not suddenly, I guess Cincinnati supporters would say, but Lucho Acosta on the bench, he gets 30 minutes, but it has not been going very well for him in Dallas. The aforementioned Christian Kappas on the bench, he gets a half. Sebastian Lletget on the bench. Like, there's names in there. A lot of them maybe a little bit long in the tooth, but it's still not going well for Eric Quill and FC Dallas.
No, it's really not, and they can't even blame their striker either, because Petar Musa's got 12 goals and 5 assists, right? Like, just for like direct assists. So like, they're even getting production from their striker that I think that 25 other MLS teams would love to have this season. I mean, the issues, like, they're not good defensively, I think, is one of their biggest issues. And I know that you say, okay, it's Major League Soccer. Most teams' big flaw is that their defending is not as good as their attacking. I mean that they lose over half of their tackle attempts. They lose over half of their duels. They lose over half of loose ball recoveries. Like, this is just a team that is built, I would imagine, based on how they play. When they lose possession, it's immediately regroup and let the ball go. The ball is not ours anymore. We're grateful to have had it, but now is not our time. So let's get into our panic stations. And it makes it a little bit easier because it's almost more of a passive defending state rather than the proactive. Like, you don't necessarily have to go full Bradley Carnell, Jesse Marsh. We're going to, like, press them into submission necessarily, but some level of like dynamism generally makes you harder to break down. And I think teams are just finding right now it is too easy to break down. FC Dallas, Martin Peiss has not been playing at his usual standard of goalkeeping, and so maybe they're finding shots a little easier to squeak through. But ultimately, this is more of a Lucho Acosta thing. This is the guy who kind of forced these changes. This is the guy who forced that weird little number 10 carousel between Cincinnati and Portland, as well as Dallas. He had made the comments that he wanted to leave a genuine contender for supporter shields and MLS Cups and every competition on offer because he wanted to be the guy again, or whatever the case may be. Felt that one promised too many that were broken. This is where he ended up now. And it's like that moment of like every like kind of like 90s like sitcom where there's the dream episode and they get the high school crush, but then everything falls apart around them, and right before they wake up it's like, this is what you wanted, right? And it's like trying to like teach you a moral and bludgeon you in the face. It almost feels like they're kind of having that moment right now where it's just like, this is what you wanted, right? You got to join FC Dallas. Like, this is it. So
does it get better anytime soon, or is this an unfixable situation as you see it?
I think it's going to take some turnover. There's a lot of veterans on this team too. Like, and I don't say that necessarily as a bad thing. I think that a lot of teams can skew too far into youth and sell on potential and not have the veterans. But when your team, it's Inter Miami problems. When a lot of your team's over 30, they don't run like they used to, right? And that's fine. But it does mean that you're making some other trade-offs. And yes, you are a team that has a famously good academy within MLS ranks where you could just have homegrowns kind of have the other minutes and do the hard yards like you saw with the Red Bulls last year around Emil Forsberg. But I just think that there still is a talent deficit, and especially if you get this Lucho Acosta and not MVP Lucho Acosta, if this is who you have, the kind of grumpy and grumbling and the move didn't work out the way he wanted to and he's sulking about it guy, like, yeah, sometimes that's even worse than having a player who wants to be there who isn't as good. Actually, most of the time.
But why isn't it working out? I mean, I think Cincinnati supporters will say he wasn't working for a while before the sale. But like, I still think he can be a difference maker, and we've talked about him and potentially playing for the U.S. at some point. This season has not helped that case at all, or my enthusiasm for that case. But what do you feel like it is? Is it the player himself? Is he not at the level he needs to be anymore? Is he not as motivated as he was? Is it the squad around him? Is it the coaching? Is it some combination of all of those things?
Yeah, inevitably it's some combination, but you do look at his stats down the stretch last year, and it did cool off a little bit. I see what Dallas fans are seeing, but he did still have 2 goals and an assist across 4 games in October, right? Like, so the real thing is that he had a bad series against New York City FC, and then they got eliminated, and everything fell apart from there. So I don't really know if it's so much as we should have seen this coming. I certainly didn't see this coming. I thought that he was going to be like a no-brainer. We're going to restore what was my preseason prediction, the most fun soccer we've seen in Dallas since Fabian Castillo and Mauro Diaz, and that has not happened categorically. Though I will say a lot of 3-4s, 4-3 scoreline, 7-goal shootouts. Those are fun if you're neutral. Just probably not if you're a Dallas fan and you're losing them because you blew 3 goals in the first half. With Lucho, I think he looks crabby. There are just certain players that, like, when you can tell they're not good at hiding when they're not having a good day, right? Like, and it's not just like scowling like Christian Pulisic body language. It's genuinely just like not making the same run off the ball that doesn't usually get rewarded with a pass that he usually does, or not trying to sell a fake as hard as he usually does, or not making the same sort of take on technical motion and taking it a little more half-heartedly where maybe he loses the ball more often, whatever the case may be. Just like the body language has just been really, really crummy from him for a lot of this year. And I don't know. I mean, same with all of Dallas, I would say. I don't really know if they have a firm grasp on what they're being asked to do under Eric Quill right now, but the reality of it is Lucho Acosta has played in 6 different months of the season so far. He has only gotten goal contributions in 2 of those 6 months, which means that he has had 4 months. April and May, he played full slates. February, he had the season opener. And now July, 3 games, where he has gone without a single goal contribution. That is not great.
Would you rather be an FC Dallas supporter or a New England Revolution supporter?
I think Revs, because of Dogzo and the lore, but I think also because they're probably closer to a change. And so, like, there's at least something where it's not like we're in the first wave of the... It's like Toronto when they tried the Italian project, right? Where it's like 6 months into it, you're just like, oh no, oh no, I didn't want to sign up for this. And you know that you still have 2.5 years left of this, or 2 years with a buyout, or whatever the case may be. Like, I think that New England can look and say, coming into the season, Caleb Porter was one the coaches who was under the most duress. It was pretty much him and Peter Vermees were kind of seen as the coaches where their teams had really stagnated. And it was an open question about how they would be able to perform in 2025. And Vermees obviously did not last long before Kansas City moved on. Obviously, they haven't replaced him yet. They're going to replace the CSO before they replace the head coach. So it's going to take some time to get your good, general manager / chief sport brain guy before you go in and then go back to the well to get a coach. So that's why you haven't heard about a Kansas City coach yet. But I think that when you look at it with New England, it's a lot of the players were kind of brought in, and he said it himself at the start of the season, like, finally I have my roster. There aren't Bruce Arena guys here. And Bruce took most of the holdovers, right? And brought over like Dave Romney and Nick Lima and some other guys and brought them in when he joined San Jose. So now it is Caleb Porter's squad, and it has not worked, and it has not looked very good. Yes, they were unbeaten in 9 at one point. That is no longer the case. They have fallen off rapidly, and I think
they
it's
are
just
beaten in 9 now, right?
They are now beaten in 9. I want to repeat that. The Revs are beaten in 9. It just sounds mean now. Before it sounded like bemused shock, and now it just sounds like I'm trying to put them in their place, and I'm not. But I think that the reality is now, I think we've seen this is the ceiling of where it can get at a certain point. So you can have some good stretches, you can also have some bad stretches. Every team in MLS does. But the reality is you're just not performing at a caliber of other teams in the league. So I think it'll be interesting to see, does he get the rest of the season so that they kind of time the coaching market, or do they try to do that thing where you're proactive, so you make the change when you don't have the guy and you just punt on the season, and then when the candidate you like hits the market, you're ready to strike, or whatever the case may be? I don't know. Do they just go DC United style and hire a guy we've never heard of who coached at Anderlecht 10 years ago? I don't know. Maybe you do. But
what is the most likely scenario with Robert Kraft as the owner, do you think?
I think it's probably see out the season,
pass this press
quiet press release.
Okay.
Yeah, quiet press release. I mean, it'll be a quiet press release. It won't be like a big bombastic sort of moment per se. And I'm sure there will be a lot of holdovers who are kept on the staff, as you've seen with Bruce Arena's departure as well. I would say that, give him the rest of the season, quietly play out the string, or maybe right before the finale. This is a move that I've seen more clubs make in recent years, where you kind of do everything but the last home game. So the last home game is when you get your new coach bump, so maybe you get that sort of, all the players look like they're having fun again, right before season ticket renewals go out. So I don't know if it's going to be one of those things where he gets 16 home games, but not the last. But I would imagine that he will be here for most of the season, but that, again, that's much more of a Kraft thing than what would be best for their playoff hopes thing.
I feel like our MLS update games of the weekend has been kind of a bummer so far. But let's keep it going. How are things in St. Louis, Jeff?
Yeah, not great. One of the weirdest soccer games I've seen in a minute, where it was like 3 we need VAR to determine whether or not this is a penalty calls, and all of them result in a penalty, and then that's the scoring, 2-1. St. Louis loses at home after scoring first. And it's just like I've been watching Roman Bürki so much closer in other phases than I usually do, and this was a lot easier to do when they came to Minnesota, and I was able to kind of find a perch and just watch his body language and how he interacts with the defense, because I had this theory that he wasn't as happy because his metrics have dropped off this year. And lo and behold, he does not look very happy with the team in front of him. And there are a lot of times where he will like switch off. I remember in that Open Cup game, there was just like kind of a shrug of dissatisfaction as the ball started to approach the box, which is not, I think most goalkeeping coaches will say that's not great for him for making a save, is having slumped shoulders. It just looks like it's in a really tough spot right now. Fans are understandably unhappy. I've never seen more fans actually say it's time to make a change with the chief soccer officer, general manager with Lutz Pfannenstiel, than they are right now. And I think that there's a lot of disillusion in terms of you'd built a really good team, but then I don't know why you're dismantling it. I don't know why Anthony Markanich leaves for $50,000 to a conference rival, and now he can't stop scoring against them. And now he's one of the better left backs in the Western Conference, if not Major League Soccer this year with Minnesota United. And then, Azeel Jackson, like now he's gone, and he just seems like he's going to kind of have like a very squirrely nomadic career based on how the last few years have gone. But at the same point, I think fans wanted to see if there was more there, and then you have to weigh what do fans want first, what's in the best interest of the club. I would say it probably made sense to move on from him in hindsight. If he is going to be more of a mercenary figure in the landscape, that's fine, but it's not looking very good. It's not sounding the same. The fans, I just think generally they foster one of the better atmospheres, and they deserve a winning team, and they feel they deserve it, and they were told that they were going to get work done toward that, and you haven't seen the work, I guess.
Is AZ Jackson in Poland now? Is that where he's?
That sounds right. I was going to say it's like Poland, or it's like the Scandinavian area, but I'm pretty sure it's Poland. It was one of those clubs where it was like, if I tried pronouncing it here, just Bialystok. Okay. Jagiellonia Bialystok. If I have to try. Flash. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, congratulations to him for getting out of St. Louis. Commiserations to the supporters still watching St. Louis. We'll see how that plays out. Same for New England, same for FC Dallas, but New York have a good number 10 who's also a left winger, so that's fun. Any other notes from this past weekend, Jeff, before we call this week reviewed?
You already mentioned the Miami game without Messi and DePaul and Alba. Just worth noting for the Supporters Shield race, they held Cincinnati to a draw, 0-0. There was a moment right at the end where it looked like Cincinnati might have scored, and then it was ruled off because of VAR, a header from Miles Robinson, if memory serves. So that could prove to be a very memorable moment in the season down the stretch if it ends up being decided by 2 points. But yeah, overall, I think we're getting into the thick of it, and it's just like a weird time of the calendar for the Leagues Cup to be, and you lose track of where the regular season is, and we're going to have to do like a re-preview show, I'm sure, before the regular season resumes. But I think that's just the nature of soccer in 2025. You are not going to have continuity, and it's going to be very abrupt, and a random thing is going to happen. You shift your attention, and then you can go back to the league when we have time.
All right. Well, I've written down re-preview show for post-Leagues Cup. I'm excited for that one. For now, Jeff Ruder, thank you for that suggestion and for all of your thoughts this afternoon. Yes, this afternoon. We are now into the afternoon. I greatly appreciate it.
We are now. My bad. Of course. Thank you. Yeah, credit to Taylor for working with Jeff got a weird random Tuesday off, and it was moving at a weird random Tuesday off's pace.
Amen.
So thank you, Taylor.
Appreciate you being here at all and finding a way to not be suspended. Crafty work by you. Joe Lowry
don't tell anyone.
Be back from his 1 week suspension, which I assume he also spent with Jordi Alba and Lionel Messi and Rodrigo de Paul. Big news if he did. But for now, listeners, thank you all so much. We'll talk to you again very soon.